Welcome everyone. It's great to see some familiar faces, and this is exciting because I know that we're all working on AI these days. So, just a quick introduction. I'm Kim Lopez Walters. I moderated the last session, and I am a CPG marketer. I work mainly with new product development and do a lot of market research, insights, and even some innovation brainstorming with AI and some other ways of working with it. So today I'll be your moderator. We have a panel to talk a little bit about some of the exciting things that they're doing with AI. Really quick, I just want to do some light housekeeping, and that is please put your questions into the chat. Mackenzie will help us moderate that chat, and we'll be trying to address them during the Q&A. So, and then at the very end, of course, we always want to hear a little bit about the feedback and what we can do to have some other sessions. So there'll be a feedback in the chat at the end. So we would really appreciate it if you guys help us, continue with some great content and thinking about these ideas. So just some context of what we're doing for today. This, check-in is meant to be an update from our last session this time last year, where AI was really just becoming, something that we were all just interested in and growing rapidly. And now I think that with AI changing, we thought it would be a good time to think a little bit about asking our past panelists how they are using AI, what changes they've seen in the last year, what are they most excited about, and really, as marketers, how are they using the new tools that are coming out, and what do we predict for the coming year? So that's what we hope you take away from today. And whether you've joined us last year or just coming in now, we hope that this will, generate some really great fresh ideas, maybe some strategies for you to use and practical insights. So one thing I'm going to transition now to just set the stage that, we all talk about AI, but while all language learning models, which LLMs, as you all know, are a type of artificial intelligence or AI, not all AI is an LLM. So one of the things we want to set the stage for right now is that in today's session, we're going to be speaking on LLMs like Chat GPT and Gemini and Claude, but we're going to speak to some other tools that we know marketers are also using, and creatives like AI-powered design and visual content tools, because we think that that's very relevant to possibly what you're working with today. So let's get started. I'm going to ask for our panelists to introduce themselves. So thank you for being here today. Lawrence, why don't you go ahead and start? Introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Lawrence Shannon, and I'm a professional creative of a couple of types. I spent about 20 years, 25 years in the ad agency world as a creative director, first starting as a copywriter and working my way up through that world. And I'm also a director, both of episodic television and of commercials, and currently work doing that and as a consultant to ad agencies, both as a freelance creative director and to clients as an advisor on their creative positioning, on branding, and related creative disciplines.
Great, thank you so much. Tiffany, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany. I have over 20 years in product and design and marketing, and I have been extremely excited to work with AI. Dove in very early on to try out many different tools. I still use it in my day-to-day experience. In the last year, I led product and design and marketing for Wayfound, which is an AI platform that helps you explain your AI agents. So I think we'll talk about this a little bit further out. How do you trust the AI when you are seeing it around? How do you know what the AI is doing for you in a product, from a product focus? And most recently, I am heading product design and research at Demandbase, where we are using it to enhance the go-to-market experience. So how do you increase pipeline across the end-to-end journey, and what kind of ways can we make the experience more delightful? How do you make it proactive proactive pipeline. And so I've been really excited to experiment with all the different tools, get into that later, but Figma Make and V0 are my most used right now, but I'm using ChatGPT on a daily basis to help me make the best use out of those tools.
That's a really great segue into our next section. And I think one thing I'd love for people to do is put into the chat some of the tools and your favorite tools and maybe, AIs that you're using today, and everybody can see what's, interesting and exciting for those of us who are using AI. So let's just get started and talking a little bit about some of those favorite tools. One of the most exciting areas of this space is really how quickly those tools are coming to be used every single day. And many, as Tiffany said, she's using them, and how marketers are putting them to work. So what I'd like to ask our panelists to talk a little bit about is, what are your favorite AI tools that are coming out? How are you using them successfully? And do you see any limitations in some of those? So, let's start with Tiffany, and I think you might have some examples and things to talk about there.
Yeah, so I mean, the two that I just mentioned are really great tools. Figma Make, which is Figma's version of, I would say, prompt-based product building. That one, you can prompt out an entire experience with, I mean, you have to be pretty explicit as to what you want that experience to be. And it uses quite a lot of tokens, but you can get what I will call a sketch of what a vision could be in a matter of minutes. You can have that tool create something that would have taken at least in the old days, it would have to sketch it all out first. You can still start with a sketch, so you're still utilizing some of your skills that you've developed. You can upload that and say, this is kind of where I want to start. But with a very smaller set of prompts, you can get something that looks very real. I will say that is something that is a blessing and a curse. From a vision perspective and getting people to align towards a certain goal, it can be helpful, but it is a sketch. So that for me is the biggest limitation right now of the AI, is it looks so real, but maybe isn't as thought out as it could be. But I don't know if you want me to keep talking about that. I have definitely a philosophy on where this AI can help, which is when you're in this expansion mode, or when you're divergent, you want more to explore more ideas. AI can be a generative tool that gives you a ton of different options to explore. I think it has a harder time in converging back to what is the right solution. I think that takes more of the critical thinking skills that I think we all need to still be vigilant at developing, and not always accepting that whatever the AI spit out is the best solution. It only gets you all of the different options. How do we make it go down?
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective. And Lawrence, I know you have some perspective on this too.
Yeah, I think in my work, I use it in a couple of different ways. So in terms of general large language models, I work with all of them just because I'm always curious to see what one of them says versus another. And they do come up with different answers, even if they are somewhat similar. So I use ChatGPT, I use Claude, I use Perplexity, I use Leonardo. But also in the not traditional LLM sense, I use a number of things that are AI, but are applied more to image generation and image manipulation. So I use Topaz quite a bit to upres old video footage. I use a few different products that help with color correction and shorten the time and really improve the efficiency on color correcting video. And we also find ourselves as creatives, we used to always work in pairs. There was always an art director and a copywriter. And even after that became less formal, you always had a creative partner. But now with remote work being more common, I find that I'm asked to work alone a lot. Sometimes that's just because they want to hire one creative instead of two. But that process of bouncing ideas off each other and seeing which things are just in your head and make sense there and which things resonate is important. And so AI can sometimes stand in for that creative partner that gives you ideas that help shape the things you do as you bounce things back and forth. In the case of most large language models, they're not great at the creative side of things. And so the process I have is often I'll ask it a question I would ask a human partner. It'll give me 10 responses that are terrible, but one of them will have a word in it that gives me an idea. And that'll lead to something that is a good idea. So it's very good for getting you unblocked. Anyone who writes for a living or even just for fun knows that feeling of writer's block. And I think LLMs especially are a great tool for unblocking the writer's block just by giving you new ideas that you should have thought of, but you didn't.
And that's such
Yeah,
a
maybe go ahead.
like it's such a good point of thinking of it as kind of like this assistant or co-pilot. It's something that you're collaboratively working with, and that I feel like that's also been my key is it's not like a one prompt is going to get it done. It's this collaborative back and forth that will give you the best results.
Yeah.
Yeah, and go ahead.
That because I'm in the video space quite a bit, I have been experimenting a lot with the available video generative AIs like Veo and like Runway and so on. That's as much to tell just when I'm going to accidentally replace myself and be out of a job as it is to use it. But I like to be pretty up on the things that are doing probably much better and cheaper what I've been doing for 30 years on set.
But it helps you scale out your skills. And I feel like that's because you're an expert in that, right? Like for me, I feel like because I've had all of these experiences, that's where AI really helps you extend your capabilities. And I think that's where the future is heading.
And it's very important to have that expertise because AI is more than fallible. You need always someone at the reins who knows or has a good idea of when it's wrong. It can do a lot of things brute force that a human brain can't that are great, but there are a lot of capabilities it doesn't have. And so often its output is more impressive to a non-expert than an expert, and you need that expert to recognize when it's not understood correctly and steer it back.
Yeah, I think, in fact, I think we had an example of something, like that. We talked a little bit about this double diamond approach and kind of the wine glass half full. If you want to talk a little bit about that, both of you, and maybe Mackenzie, you can show a little graphic there.
So we were having this conversation about some of the limitations of AI, and one of them that I worry about is it's only able to produce what it's trained off of. So the example, it's a little bit older now, but the idea, if you can ask any LLM, can you show me a wine glass that is all the way filled to the brim? And I think even still now, it's unable to give you that full result because it's trained on data sets on this wine glass that is filled correctly, and it just can't do it. I tried tricking it into filling the glass, like fill it with grape juice or fill it with water, now turn it purple, like all these different variations of trying to fill the wine glass, and it just would not do it.
I think the reason for that, though, if we go back to one of the earlier slides, the reason for that is that it's always calculating the most likely next thing. I mean, that's sort of how all of these models work, is huge training sets and what is likely to be it. And out in the world, in the wild, there are almost no pictures of a wine glass filled to the brim because that's not how you use it. It's correct to fill it to that sort of widest point is what wine people recommend. So when it has this massive training set of data, and there are only one or two or no examples of a wine glass where it actually goes to the brim, it assumes that those are anomalies, that those aren't good examples. And so you almost have to try and trick it. And if we look at some of the prompts in these slides, that's what they represent, is actually people trying to trick it. So first you ask for a full glass of wine, and you get what is half full. But realistically, if you work in a restaurant, that is a full glass of wine. So it makes sense in a way. And then you try to trick it even further, and you say a glass full of wine, not just halfway, but still it doesn't, in its library and its training set, have anything that is comparable but different because it's so rare. And so no matter how much explaining you give to it, you still get what seems like a likely image to it. And so it's really an example of how training sets work. And to what Tiffany said earlier, actually, because this particular example has gotten so much attention, several of the AIs do now have the ability to do a full glass of wine because they've added to the training set, and they've specifically sort of given it if then data on this kind of thing. But it was funny at the time because, as you see on the left, a wine glass completely full of red wine, with the liquid level exactly aligned with the rim, almost, it's no matter how much explaining, it still had to pick from its data set and couldn't. And so then when you asked it, show it actually overflowing the glass, how could they not do what you need then? And then it sort of mysteriously leaks out the side, because still to it, a glass of wine is filled to that midpoint. So it must then overflow if it's beyond that, out of the middle. So, and it
Right.
works for small quantities. So it's just as unusual to have tiny bits of wine in image sets of wine glasses. So if you ask it for a quarter glass of wine, you still get your regular old glass of wine, which, some would say is close to a quarter anyway, but a tenth full looks like a quarter. So it clearly doesn't do math. And people who have used it for mathematical things will find the same thing. And then finally, if you use an actual measure, like a tablespoon, it gives you the same thing. And finally, a tiny drop of wine. God, look at what you did to me. You tricked me, bro.
I wonder if we could prompt out a video of a glass being poured with wine and just maybe.
And what point it would go to. Yeah, that would be a good.
That's interesting. So I love the fact, Tiffany, you're thinking a little bit about experimenting. And, one of the questions I really have for the panel is, where are you finding the time to experiment? Where do you spend the time experimenting? Does it happen deliberately, or does it just happen, as you hear about it, or as part of client projects? I'm interested in how you're discovering these things for, out in the wild and for yourself.
I talk to a lot of people. I mean, for me, if I have a project, it really makes a huge difference. And if I focus on making this project work, I will give the example of Figma Make. I wanted to test it between V0 and Figma Make, and Friday I just dedicated a chunk of time to doing that. And I think that's the best way with AI tools, is to get in and try it out, see where the limitations are, and see how you might be able to solve it. And then, yeah, I talk to a lot of other designers, and I am following quite a few that talk about AI a lot on LinkedIn, and now at Demandbase, there's a lot of AI groups that you can join, and AI enthusiasts is what we're calling them, and everybody's posting some new tool.
Right. How about you, Lawrence?
Well, one place that you see a lot of the innovation happening in pretty much real time is actually on social media. As soon as something releases, you'll hear about it on Twitter. I still don't call it X, and I don't plan to get out of that. You see it a lot there. Even on Instagram, there's quite a bit, almost instantly after a new model has come out. And I do have a small group of like-minded creatives who are people I work with anyway a lot. And we all sort of keep each other up to speed, and each have different sources. So we feed our own pipelines. But I think the other thing that's been interesting is in certain types of our work where there is a little flexibility and maybe some time, we'll try using it as we develop creatives. For us, one of the most common ways to use it is in presentations. There are still limits, which we'll talk about later, about what you can use in an actual finished product that goes out to the general public. But in terms of presenting and making pitches, it's very common to use it. And I know in the ad industry, almost all client pitches these days have some AI elements in them. And we use them in director's treatments a lot, both for television shows and for commercials. We'll use, very often we're asked to imagine a scene or a scenario that doesn't exist. And having a pencil drawing or something from a storyboard artist isn't that helpful always. So it's a great tool for something like that, something that's hard to construct and hard to imagine unless you can do it from nothing. And that's exactly what AI image generation does. So most directors' presentations and most creative presentations these days have visual AI elements in them.
From a
Great.
product perspective, I will say there is a push to make sure you can turn on and off any AI-enabled features that you're building into the product, because there are certain industries that are regulated that cannot have AI as a result. Like if we have AI summaries in our product, we have to be able to shut those off. I mean, this is kind of getting to what I worked on at Wavefound, is how do you explain what the AI is doing, and how do you make amends for when it does something wrong, or how do you fix it and make it better? If you say have an agent that goes off the rails and gives refunds to all your customers, how do you make it not do that? It's a different question, right? Because if it was a human that was making similar mistakes at probably a similar rate, would that person still have a job versus the agent, which would be completely shut off?
I think we're getting into an interesting area, and that is really thinking a little bit about some of the trust, the challenges, and what that brand impact is, right? So, I mean, this is one of the hottest debates happening right now. And one of them is around ownership of AI generated content is out. So, I'm interested in, is it the user, the tool? Who owns all of this, and how are you seeing companies navigate that kind of gray area?
In my observation, there are two sides to that. One is the sort of inherent instinctive ethical side, and then the other is what does the law say right now? And one of my clients happens to be an intellectual property attorney, so I have this conversation quite a bit with him. And one of the things that's interesting that most people have run into now, if you work in marketing or advertising or creative, is that ownership is legally a question mark. And many clients are saying that they don't want AI generated material for that reason rather than other reasons, because you can't own it in many cases. So say you generate an image. In the past, if you created a company logo or you shot photography for your brand, that would be owned by your brand and no one could mess with it because it's claimed property intellectually of that company. Those same claims can't be made for AI generated material in most cases. They are effectively public domain to do what they wish with. So people can mess with your brand in ways that they couldn't with images that you created. Now, of course, the general public doesn't necessarily know what was and wasn't done. So it's not necessarily happening at a large scale, but I think because companies are risk averse, they're avoiding it for now. And the coda to that is that there are a couple of companies now that specifically are working on image and video generation models that are cleared to have ownership, where anything our model does, you do own and can be protected.
Interesting. So let's talk a little bit, and maybe Tiffany, then you can also address this idea of, if you want to own it, then where does the originality come? I mean, how does that, it feels like things become a lot of the same and less original. So, where does AI lose its edge, and how do we ensure that we are creating original things and not the same thing every time?
I would say the table stakes get higher. Everything gets raised higher. And I think this is causing a little bit of when do you release a feature, or when do you acknowledge that you're putting these things out into the open? Because as soon as you put out that you're creating this product, it can be copied instantly. Like if you created it with AI and you did that within a day, then somebody else can feasibly look at what you did and create the same, relatively the same experience. Obviously, it's probabilistic, it's created by AI. There maybe will be subtle differences, but that is leading to things where maybe you could talk as a product design team about things that you're working on and like some of the cool things we're putting into the product. But now I would really recommend not doing that, because as soon as you put it into a blog, it's like, oh, somebody else can copy that. Like you see it even in like press releases now. I see like MCP servers. Every big company has their MCP server, and everybody is like, it feels like it follows suit. Like if one big company does it, then all of the other companies are following suit. It's like a catch-up game, and that's what I mean by the table stakes just get higher. You have to do it because everybody else has it, but then um, original IP, I think, needs to be nurtured internally quite a bit more than I've seen in the past.
Yeah,
So how, yeah, go ahead, Lawrence. I'm interested in how you also think that brands are fighting back to that.
yeah, I mean, the capability of creating something unique is changing, because in the past, for a painter, the way their brush strokes worked was distinctive. It was very hard to copy something. And then you got machines that physically could try to do it. But now you can basically copy almost anything. And so the whole argument, people talk a lot about how I don't want AI training on my images or my writing. I don't give you the right to use my stuff in your training set. And similar to the wine glass issue, you're in a position now where protecting the things that you create, but also what it was created from, is very important, because the exact voice can be mimicked by voice AI. Anything you create can basically be copied in a much more accurate way than it could in the past. And that goes to the importance of training sets. We had an interesting conversation the other day about that, and where does the stuff come from? What's it training on? In some ways, giving more data, more stuff to AI makes it better, and that's great. But in some ways, it also is a problem, because it's going to be cannibalizing itself. AI is starting to train on AI, and so it doesn't know which content is original and which is human after a certain point, unless we have a way of tagging AI content as such. And so stuff starts to feel and look like other stuff, which is the instinct of many corporate entities anyway. They tend to be risk averse. So taking real challenges is not always what they want to do. They want to do sort of a little different, that's distinctively ours, but really just copying whatever the market leader's doing. So.
Well, and I think that's interesting because I mean, the most important piece is the consumer and the audience, right? And so, what does it mean for brands and brand trust, for those consumers and what they think is expected? I mean, are we to be expecting just a blend of human and AI content going forward, or should we really expect originality?
Well, I think there's always room for originality. I'm going to put that out there. Um, I think that you can, like to the points earlier about the co-pilot and using it as an assistant to help you, like you can cannibalize your own stuff, right? Like I can take something of a look and feel and give that to the AI to say, hey, this is the interaction I want, but make it look like this, and it will do that. Like I can utilize it for what other people are doing to other people, but like from my own stuff, it makes that workflow go a lot faster. So there is a weird gray area here of what do we want AI to help us do versus versus what it can do. And I think that's definitely worth discussion. I don't think it's been completely figured out. The tools are changing every day.
And another thing that we were chatting about recently, there was the idea of which tasks does it do better than us, which does it do less well, and where is it best used? And in many cases, people are either trying to save money and therefore have it do things that probably used to be, should be done by a human. And then there are others where it's enhancing that human's ability by just doing things much more powerfully than the human could. So, for instance, in something as simple as writing a blog, if someone says, I am not a good writer, I don't know how to write a blog, I'm going to get AI to do it. Um, they won't know when it's pretty crummy. And so there are a lot of terrible blogs out there because a lot of people just think, why would I hire a copywriter whom I have to keep paying rather than just have ChatGPT do my entire blog all the time. But those blogs are terrible, and ChatGPT has its own default stylistic things that it does. And often those people don't recognize when their own thing is bad because they don't have the expertise to recognize that. So I do see that happening quite a bit. On the other hand, there are places where it can do really well in terms of summarizing, in terms of more formal document structures. There are things that it can do quite nicely. So knowing those strengths and weaknesses, I think, is really important, and not doing something just because it would save you a buck, but because it would make a better thing.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I'll give you an example, and it's kind of a backwards example of like how do you use the AI to help your communication feel more human? So like if I'm giving feedback, how can I form this in situation, behavior, impact? How can I make this a clearer statement? It can really help in those ways, even like creating that email, like you don't want to write this email, but these are the things you want in the email. It'll just restructure it for you. Um, but to your point, writing is not my background. I still have to edit it up to what I want, but it gives you that good template framework, and then you can just it saves time in the long. I think maybe it saves time. I'm not sure if you actually did it save you time rather than just typing it out? That is
That's a great point. So many
good
people
point.
just have stress around writing, and so it sort of breaks the seal and gets something on paper for you, which is great for those people who are terrified of writing. Obviously, even writers have issues sometimes just getting that first thing down. So it can be, even if you have to correct it, it can be great. But sometimes it doesn't save you time. Sometimes it's really just getting over that hump of getting something started.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think those are great, challenges, and maybe a good segue here too, to talk a little bit about, we all have our expertise. But, it was mentioned that some people that might not know, if they don't have an expertise, what is good and what is not. So I'm interested in also how companies are thinking about what to automate, what not to automate. How do you embrace it without and how do you gain some of that critical thinking and show your teams how to use AI? So sort of the human versus AI, interaction here. Tiffany, you want to start?
Yes. As a team leader, I feel like this is where I am the most worried about the future because it is um I feel like it's skipping a lot of steps. So even if you think of a design system or design thinking process or the double diamond process, like you have different phases of a design. And there are points where you want to have a lot of different options. As I've what I've seen in younger career folks is this feeling that they have to get to this prototype thing that is like way further off into what we're going to build land rather than creating different ideas. And really we're in this brainstorming phase. So I'm feeling like it's inhibiting a lot of the critical thinking skills that as someone that didn't grow up with AI had to be developed over time of is this good? What is this option good? This option good? What are the pros and cons of this option versus the pros and cons of this option? And being able to articulate that while you're talking to your cross-functional partnerships, in order to push back and say, this is not the final solution, this is an idea, and to not skip that step. It's very important to think about who you're designing something for. What is their goal? At the end of the day, are you solving their job to be done? How do you make sure that those steps don't get tossed out because Figma make an experience that may or may not work for your particular users? And so I feel it's inhibiting in a way that is, well, we're also not hiring as much for junior design roles across the board. I'm not saying like demand based, but like everywhere, it seems like it's much harder to break into the industry. It's hard to give enough room to create those skill sets. And I think that's a giant problem that needs to be solved. Even to the point like, take away the computer. Let's just sketch on Post-its. Let's sketch on paper and see if we can take out the technology a little bit to develop.
I know a
Yeah.
lot of employers are having trouble now with how do we train our junior people, even if you do have them. And the more something that is essentially a black box is doing certain parts of the work, those of us who used to do that kind of work knew how to do it, but the current generation doesn't. So there is this gap, especially in creative positions. And remote work is a big contributor as well, because there isn't that same mentorship in the workplace often for creatives if they're working remotely. So they don't see how the sausage is made, as they say. So even to the people who create large language models, there's a certain black box aspect to it. They don't always know how it's working under the hood, which is interesting. And so I think there is a training issue. And some of it is me, shaking my fist at the clouds, because there was definitely a time where people told me no one's learning how to write cursive in school anymore. And I thought, oh my God, what are they going to do? Like, no one knows how. And honestly, you look back now and it's like, probably don't need it. When you don't have to write much except to
I
yourself.
disagree. You need cursive to make that cognitive brain function. I think you get something by
Oh, yeah,
being.
there's a value. Absolutely. It's just not the survival skill it used to be. And maybe I'm saying this because my own handwriting was always criticized as being illegible and terrible. So I'm,
But
but
I
yes,
think
like
you brought up the remote situation. That could be a whole other hour of discussion on how do you make remote work for. I think it's also the same. The junior people in their career, the remote work is not good for the development of their skills. I talked to my nephew who is a engineer, and he wanted to quit because one day of work week he had to drive into the office, and I'm like, you should do it. Why wouldn't you just go into the office, learn, like code pairing is really important to gain those skills. So I think that's a generational thing that is happening with remote work.
you have to look at
I agree. And I think that also there's this isolation, right? And I think that the AI can continue to exacerbate some of that because you just keep asking AI in the younger, generation versus the interaction that you really do have with other people.
and people don't tend to have a nuanced or balanced view on average of AI. They either think it's amazing and it says all this stuff, and how could it know that? And it's, just. And then there are people who got one wrong answer and they're like, it's always wrong and it's dumb and I hate it and it's useless. And the idea of figuring out what it's good at and what it's not, and understanding that it is both terrible and amazing, is really important. And I think a lot
Yeah.
of people don't do that. They're either in or out based on their first few experiences. So I think
Yeah.
that's a factor as well.
I think this is interesting because we're really talking now about sort of futuristically, how are we interacting? Who do we see, gaining some of the skills? So I want to ask before we start the Q&A a little bit about, what are you most excited about in the next year for AI developments? Where do you see that happening? What advice do you have to other marketers to stay ahead of the curve?
The biggest piece of advice is just try stuff. Keep playing with it. Don't assume that past failures are going to continue, because it's moving so rapidly and the models are getting so much better so quickly, that any issue you've had may be solved in, a month or 6. And so I'm excited to see what it does in video, because I was myself saying 6 months to a year ago, oh yeah, you really can't get it to do what you want. I had mentioned the idea of the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, which is when you shoot a bunch of shots at a target, at a wall, and then you go up to it and you draw the target around them. It was a blank wall before. So there was a bit of that, like you could ask it for something and what came out was cool, but it wasn't really what you'd imagined in your head. And if you needed it to be, then that was problematic. But now they're introducing so much more control to the video generation in AI that we're going to be able to do that. And it's closer than most of us had imagined.
Building on
Yeah.
building onto what you just said is like I am very excited to see how fast AI is progressing. I think that one of the things that I am challenging myself with is to go back and try the tools and see where they're at. I've tended to get stuck into the ChatGPT sphere, but I think Gemini's made a lot of improvements in especially connecting it to their search functionality, and as well as Claude and I mean, I've always used it for the coding part, but they each have their own unique perspectives. So going back and testing things that maybe you wrote off at the beginning have probably significantly changed in just 3 months, let alone 6 months. So, yeah.
One of the areas just to, that I'm really excited about is I've been doing more qualitative investigation for market research and insights. I think it can really gather a lot of information that typically, so much data, but also just qualitatively, it can search the universe, tell me what people are actually saying. And it does come down to, sort of that critical thinking. How can you gather all of that and really think about it? But what used to take ultimately, 2 days to do a competitive analysis takes like what, 5 minutes at the most, right? And have something really coherent and great. So that's one of the things that I'm really excited about, is how to marry the qualitative with the quantitative on the market research side that I'm working on. Did you have something else, Lawrence, you wanted to add?
We talk a lot about exactly what you said, the qualitative versus the quantitative, and how important that is, because it's great in the qualitative sense of helping you generate ideas. And in that sense, it's like a focus group, which is not representative of how the country feels or the world feels about whatever X subject is, but it is great for generating discussion topics, let's say. So that's qualitative. Quantitative is really a function of what data it's been plugged into. And again, you get back to the data sets that are available and the training sets. And at that end of things, it can also be very good because it can crunch that data much more quickly than you can, just as you described. So it's really knowing what the limitations and capabilities are for each of those.
I have a little bit of trust issues with it crunching the data. Like I almost feel like the first result is just wrong. And I wanted to check it. Like that my first response is, are you sure? Did you check that all of this data that I just put in, are you sure this is the result of that? And a lot of times it finds itself at fault. And so that is something to be aware of.
That's
Yeah.
inherent to its model, because people think because it comes out of the computer and your home PC in whatever form it
Yeah.
was, even 25, 30 years ago, could do calculator stuff better than any calculator. So you have to understand what machine, what box it's going through. And so a large language model is probabilistic, but it's not calculating.
Right.
So it can just say 2 + 2 is 3.5, and it has no idea it's wrong. So you absolutely shouldn't trust it, because it's not going through that same
Right.
pathway. It's not calculating it. It's sort of taking a random guess based on a bunch of stuff that is not calculation. So again, understanding how it works and why it works is important.
Yeah, and maybe this last little thing is, where do you guys predict this we're going to be if we have the same panel in a year? I mean, I know Lawrence, you have some perspective on that, and Tiffany too, but are we going to be having very specific AI things do very specific things versus broad. What does this look like for us?
One thing that I have been hearing a lot from my friends in the business of actually creating AI models is that there's going to be a lot of enterprise level uh, large language model customization. So instead of what's the next ChatGPT or what's the next Claude, it's going to be building something that is trained on the specific data set of that company. And that data might be proprietary and they don't want it to get out, but they can still build a pretty impressive model internally if they pay to do it. That is the equivalent of their own custom made ChatGPT trained on the data they need it to have. So I'm hearing a lot of that and things built to respond in a certain way that's appropriate for a particular industry or a particular niche of an industry. I think we're going to see a lot more of that as opposed to just iteration on these big, broad, general purpose large language models, which in a sense are really just sort of proofs of concept for that whole way of doing things.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think there's some marriage between the general large language model and the specific organization or industry trained AI that gets to a different result. I was going to originally answer that maybe we would all be AI and like it would just be our digital assistants that come in 6 months and can answer for us. But I don't know if that's totally true. We could try it. It'd be a fun experiment.
We should figure out what to do with the time. Are we going to be by a pool, like having a cocktail? What do the real us do? Or do we sit in a tank like in Matrix?
No,
Uh,
we'll still be trying to make the agent work up to the second that we have to go on.
The other model that I've heard discussed a lot, and I think is going to be super useful, is the bringing together of different types of AI under one model that is more accurate across a wider range of things. So right now you have the large language model, and it's kind of isolated from anything that does real calculations. And so something that can have a super broad search. Right now, if you just rely on Google's AI results, let's say when you return a search, not that great. You'll miss out on a lot of stuff. But Google's actual search returns all this data. So once you have a model that can combine all of the expansiveness of what's on the web with the ability to make inferences that a large language model has with a computer calculation style model that can be accurate with numbers. And then the hard part presumably will be having its internal workings know when to use which and how to combine those to get a great result. That's, I think, the longer distance future of AI is that kind of a model that isn't just one construction. Many of the people who work in large language models think, oh, eventually it's going to become this supercomputer all-knowing thing. But most people who are in that field say that we're actually going to hit a limit on what it can do. Large language models can only do so much just because of their probabilistic nature. So once we hit that, the only way to keep going is with these sort of combination models.
I think we're seeing the combination models coming to fruition and getting that orchestrator agent to work right is key to making a good or bad experience. But that orchestrator then becomes your assistant, the one that will help you get anything that you need done. I mean, I would love to see that not only in the enterprise, but also more as a personal kind of assistant that the promise of the multimodal experience where this one agent will be able to get everything done is super. I still think it has legs. I have tried operator. It's less than good. So hopefully they can fix that.
Yeah, we want things that make our lives easier, and we all know that anytime, even when you're not working, you say, oh my God, I don't know how my day was so busy. I'm not actually working on anything right now. So going to the DMV takes 3/4 of your day and stupid stuff like that. If you could renew your license, be reminded of it, say yes, and then have it be done, that would be great. So once something is expansive enough to know when something needs to be done and then take care of it so that you can focus on things you want to or should be doing. That's, I think, a massive leap.
I saw it
That's
like
great.
device that is called Bee, and it like listens to you the whole day, and it will give you a summary of what you did that day, which
Ah,
is like, do I want to know it that bad? Maybe.
I'm
Well,
sure.
maybe that feels like maybe you were really productive. So, so I want to give the audience here an opportunity to ask some questions and maybe just some comments about what you're doing. So, I'm going to turn it over to Mac and see if there were some specific questions that we can answer here. Thank
Hi,
you.
everyone.
Well, number one, thank you to the such insightful things. So I think this really creates a lot of conversation. So go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I've been monitoring the chat and I've been taking things that people have written out. So we're going to start with this question that might be a bit technical, but I figure I'll put it out there and see if any of you know. So it says, I don't understand if we should try to use many AI agent tools in ChatGPT Marketplace. I heard there's a Chat PRD, that's product requirements document, tool that someone released to ChatGPT Marketplace. Should I trust and use that tool if I want to write a product PRD, or am I better off creating my own tool? So that's sort of, from what I understand, those like activity specific, maybe you could call them skins, but those versions within ChatGPT. Do you have any experience with those? Have you used them? What do you think?
I love I like my own ChatGPT, custom GPTs. I think you can give them specific knowledge that becomes closer to what they answer on first. I have some that will help me with storytelling, and some that, I mean, for the PRD specifically, yes, there's multiple PRD custom GPTs in there. I think trying them out and testing it against a regular chat to see if it gets you closer to what you expected is a way to see if you like it. Trust. I mean, for me, nothing ever comes out that is 100% great. You're always going to have to go in and edit it. Like after you get it to 80%, edit it all the way to the finish. But it does get to something to start from. Um, I find using those PRDs to ask the other tools to make the thing also is very useful. So starting with a plan, make the LLM make a plan, and then have it do that plan is a really fun workflow.
You really end up having to read everything it creates effectively line by line, whether that's text or code or whatever it is. So it can save you time, but I think you always want to do the calculation of this is how long it would take me. To the example Kim gave earlier, say you have this report you're having it create, and it would have taken you a full day to make it, and it does it in 5 minutes. But how long will it take you to go? Will it take you 23 hours and 55 minutes to go through every line of it? Sometimes checking something is even more time consuming than creating it. Other times it's definitely not. So you do have to do that calculation of how long does a really good, thorough go through and revision take you versus creation. And you're the guardrails. People talk about there not being any, but you are the guardrails for any of these models. And that's certainly true in a more technical or niche model, as well as the general ChatGPT.
Other
Awesome.
questions, Mac?
Yeah, thank you for that. So kind of growing on top of that, can you also please explain if one develops an AI tool, what are the obvious distribution channels? I think there's ChatGPT Marketplace. To put it there, does your tool, must your tool be developed using ChatGPT? Likewise, are there equivalent marketplaces for AI tools developed using Perplexity, Claude, etc.? So yeah, what's that sort of marketplace for those custom tools like?
Well, you could do it in all the traditional fashions, right? If you made a mobile app, you could do it in the Play Store or Apple Store or App Store. But you can, yeah, it's if you're making an application, it's wherever you would sell those applications. I think the GPT marketplace is fine. You don't have to create it in ChatGPT. A lot of code, you can inject it with whatever you want, basically.
You have to find where the people are who might use it. It's really classic marketing in a way. You figure out who your target audience would be and really identify them and then find out where they are. So some of it can be done if it's really at a coder gritty kind of level, something like GitHub. Any sort of standard distribution channel would work. But you can also and run all of that and just market it. If it's a broad use thing, you can just market it as a product and create a website and get publicity and send press releases out. All of that still works as well, just because it's a digital product. So the things we've all heard about first, like ChatGPT and Claude and the biggest names, we probably heard about because of a combination of PR and news coverage and that kind of thing. So that's on a large consumer level, that's still how you reach people.
Awesome. Thank you. So this question is going to go back more perspective-wise on creative work in general. Since AI is often the starting point for a lot of creative or marketing activities, do you think AI is limiting true creative work? And how do we really promote creative work? Um, for example, a differentiated style guide. And this might come back to your double diamond approach, Tiffany. And yeah, I'll let you take it away.
I would say that the double diamond is very grounding. I would say we should question whether or not it should start an AI. I think that was my biggest point for today is, should we be starting an AI, or should it start in the more traditional way, just Post-its, Sharpie? Maybe that's my own bias, but however you get the ideas out first, and then you can collaborate with the AI in whatever way you want. But I think grounding yourself in what you want to achieve first will go a long ways.
I think playing to its strengths rather than your weaknesses is really important. You shouldn't have it do something because you're not good at that. So if you're bad at creativity, you won't know if its output will feel great just because you didn't have to make it and you don't necessarily know good creative. It's good at different kinds of creative work and terrible at others. So one of the great fears was that it was going to take over the screenwriting world and that there wasn't going to be any screenwriting. And that probably will eventually be true. Right now, the reason it's not is because it tends to say things very literally. So if you have a conversation between two people and one's upset at the other, and you ask ChatGPT to write that scene, it will be, I'm really upset with you. Oh, why is that? Well, I was angry. That's not how people talk. When someone's upset with someone, say, oh, what's wrong? Nothing. Oh, you sure? No, I'm fine. And that's all in tone and in sort of psychology, but they're basically saying the opposite of what is actually true. And ChatGPT hasn't, and Claude, when I'm using that as a proxy for all of them, because it's probabilistic, it hasn't really figured out yet how to do that. And it can be trained and it will and all that. But so certain types of creativity that stem from unlikeliness are inherently against what ChatGPT and other large language models do because they're figuring out probability. Once you have something that can be solved with probability or with idea generation, that's a great time to bring it in. And so to what Tiffany was saying, having that underpinning of expertise and understanding of either coding or marketing or whatever you're trying to achieve, to write the strategy, to write the outline, and then you've got this skeleton and then pin more meat on it, I think is a good use of ChatGPT.
And I think yeah, you can use AI in any of the different parts of the double diamond. It's just making sure that you know what part of the double diamond you're in at that moment and not to skip through all the way to the end.
Yeah. So this is such great conversation today, and I hope that we have the opportunity to do this even sooner than another year. But I want to thank our speakers and panelists, Tiffany and Lawrence, and Mac for organizing this. We're going to have to cut this so that we can, have everybody have their day back. Please, please put your feedback And if you have any other ideas that you would love to hear about, we would love to hear them too, because we want to continue this speaker series. So again, thank you to everyone that joined. Thank you to our panelists, and hope you have a great day and you learned something great that will help you in your jobs.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Thank you.